our presentation. Thanks.
Audio. Can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Lacey. How you doing? Hey, Justin.
I can't hear you.
Oh, okay.
It says.
Hi.
All right, Justin, I'll talk to you.
All right. Might be.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Justin. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, cool. All right. So, folks, just give a quick wave if you can hear me. It's just nice to see everybody. How's it going?
I can hear you. Sorry, my laptop, like the camera broke, so I'm just on audio.
Oh, poor Kevin.
Yeah, not good to have a computer breakdown in the middle of this.
Not under the current circumstances. No, that's really quite a thing. Now here I was thinking you just had been a little too long without a haircut. I'm glad actually it's this week, because by next week I'm going to be full on Muppet, and I'm not going to turn my camera on for any reason at all. Okay, everybody ready for the guest speaker?
Yes.
Okay, Jeanne is coming. So. Oh, she's here somewhere. Hold on, let's go to gallery view.
That's how you do that.
Okay, yeah. Hi, Jeanne, how are you?
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, wonderful. Okay, let me just see. Oh, yep, here comes Tia. I'm just kind of admitting people one at a time here, Jeanne.
Okay.
You can get a look at all of our folks. And I spoke to Maya yesterday, and I knew she was going to be coming, and hopefully Carly too, and Emma.
Yeah.
So, hi Tia.
Hello.
So we'll just wait for everybody to come on in here. Okay, so Jeanne, let me introduce you around just to some of the folks we've got here right now. Mike Gill,
okay.
Can you wave, Mike? Mike is.
Oh, can he wave?
Okay, we know you're there. I'm sorry, a professor stuck at home for a little too long. He gets lively. So, Mike is. I'm actually, because I'm finishing my doc program. Mike is my mentor. Faculty mentor, so I call him Obi-Wan Kenobi. And
yeah.
And let me introduce you around. Now at the bottom of the screen, Kevin, can you just say hi, Kevin?
Hi.
How about waving? Wave, Kevin.
Well, actually, Kevin is the one that doesn't have the picture because his camera broke.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's Kevin. Hi, Kevin.
Hi.
Sorry about that. I thought
I'm charging my phone right now. Maybe I'll hop on that at the end and I can wave.
Join us anytime.
Sounds good. This is Tia. So Tia, wave for Jeanne.
Hi, Tia.
Tia was our original remote student. So Tia has been doing online instruction the whole semester. So she had to put up with all of the fits and starts at the beginning, but it sure made things easier once we got through. This is Nia. Wave at the nice lady, Nia.
Hi, Nia.
Nia and Kevin are both seniors. And Nia.
Congratulations.
Nia is, well, as soon as we figure out what to do with them, the poor things.
I know.
And Nia is our specialist on women and gender studies, and we call on her whenever we've got intersectionality. Let's see, this is Justin.
Good.
Your head. Go ahead and wave, Justin.
Justin. Hi, Justin.
And Justin travels with Lacey. Lacey is on the end here.
Hi, Lacey.
Lacey is one of the mentors who comes along with the Inclusive U program to be in class.
Good.
We make her answer questions all the time, because if you're in class, you're going to be learning disability studies, by golly. So let's just see if anybody else is waiting to come in. And whoops, uh-oh. No. Okay, well, hopefully they'll come along. I'll keep the participant side open, but oh my gosh, folks, it's lovely to see you. I've been missing students worse than bad, so I was, thinking, oh,
She has.
what top can I wear? I want to see people. I keep interrupting my husband's nap at about this time of the day when I'm on Zoom meetings. It's a little crazy. We might have a cat walk through too, but that's okay, because Lacey's got somebody tiny going by.
Yeah.
In the back.
It'll be nonstop. Sorry. That's I'm
Don't
gonna
worry
put
about it.
myself on mute because I can't trust her.
No, don't worry
A lot
about
of times since she's seen people.
it. Well, she's welcome at any point.
I have my
That's
son
right.
here too.
Oh, hey, how you doing? We hear a lot about you.
He'll be listening in too.
Okay, great. So just to, again, give people a little bit of backstory, and Jeanne, so you know about where we've been traveling through. First of all, these poor students, all last week they had to read about some of those very hard parts of disability history, about the T4 program, about eugenics and the Buck versus Bell case. So, and I kind of kept saying to myself, but it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, because we will hear about how you chose this very this very integrated, with a lot of people helping and a lot of hands, to memorialize something that was very tragic, but in a way that really honors the memory of the people who were victims of this particular action. It's just it's so lovely, and it's really awakened. It's awakened so many people's awareness and consciousness of it, but in a way that's really really beautiful and really life affirming. So we were really excited to have you come in. So go ahead and tell us how things started with the project, and people can, okay, hold on, can we do this here? Does anybody know, do people see rats? Okay, I'm trying to come up with how people can raise their hands if they've got a question. Maybe just since I can see you, maybe it might be that, and Kevin, just holler in when you'd like to ask a question, but otherwise we'll
In the chat box down at the bottom.
Okay, which side of the screen, Tia?
At the bottom
Okay, I see it at the bottom. What should I be clicking?
on chat.
Oh, by Tunket. Okay, all right. Can people raise hands that way, or if they would just?
So it says you can send a message to everyone or to anybody on the.
Okay, why don't we do that? And if your question is too long or typing isn't going too well for you, just raise your hand, and we can unmute you and let you ask your question. Okay. Okay, sounds good. So Jeannie, you have the floor or the screen or whatever it is that you have there.
Just go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. When the questions come in, a technical question, when they come in, you'll get those, right? Because I can't see well enough to read those.
Yes, I've got them, and I will read them off to you.
Okay, that's perfect. Just perfect. Well, we'll start with the 70273 project, and then we're going to go into Action T4, and then we'll come back to 70273. It's like building a sandwich. Most people can't take the Action T4, too much of it, Y'all are different. I love disabilities history class. We're going to talk more about that later. I have questions for you. So there we were in February 2016, my daughter had come up to visit us at atop this mountain in North Carolina. Maybe I'll show you my waterfall before we go. And she travels around the country as Betty Grable, impersonating Betty Grable for World War II veterans. Although now it's mostly for World War II families and enthusiasts. And so we did what we always do when she's around. We watched World War II documentaries. So we had this on, and I was sitting there stitching. Nancy is my mentally disabled sister-in-law. When she was 3 years old, she was playing on the swing set in the backyard when teenage boys came and made her part of their gang, brought a rope and hung her from the swing set. Her mother found her and time to get her down so that her body lived, but her brain was permanently altered. And 50 years later, when she was 53 years old, she's now 60, I don't know. Numbers are not my thing. But I do know that 50 years later, she started drawing. I had been down to visit her. She lives in Central Florida. And I'd been down to visit her, and we had kicked off our all-girls weekend just the way anybody would kick off an all-girls weekend, with hot fudge sundaes and milkshake chasers. Well, it was taking a little while for the hot fudge sundaes to get there. Nancy got antsy. And so I just instinctively put my journal and a pen in her hand. And she started writing her name, N-A-N, and the C-Y dribbled off down the page. And then she just started drawing. And by that night, I had 167 drawings. I called the engineer, that's what I call my husband, her brother, and said, 2 things you need to know. And he said, what's that? And I said, first of all, Nancy will never, ever, ever ride in anything but a convertible again as long as I'm drawing bread. And he said, as engineers are wont to say, do you know how much it costs to rent a convertible? And I said, if you heard an upward inflection at the end of that sentence, that's on you, because there was no question there. That was a statement of fact. I took Nancy, I had rented a convertible that time because I went by myself and I could. And picked her up with the top down, and the smile wrapped around her face about 13 times. And it took 12 sticks of dynamite to get her out of the car when it was time for her to go back. She was just, the sensory experience must have been phenomenal. And he said, okay, you said there were 2 things I need to know. What's the second? I said, the second is I need to go back to the fabric store. And he said, I thought you quit that a long time ago. And I said, I did, but I'm coming back to it. And he said, why? Which engineers are wont to ask. And I said, because Nancy started drawing today and I'm going to stitch all of her drawings. And he said, why? So I banged the phone on the table a few times and said, we've had this discussion before. You never ask an artist why she's going to do something or what she's going to do with it when she gets finished. I only know I can't not stitch these drawings. And so I started that night actually on paper, because it's all I had, stitching Nancy's drawings. And she's still drawing and I'm still stitching. When I go to visit her, I take her 10 reams of paper and she spends her days drawing. And I spend most of my day stitching. You can draw a whole lot faster than you can stitch. Let me just say that. So I'm a little behind. Dee, if you could get to the slide, wait, what is it? Slide, the one with, do you have that, access to that? Slide number 2.
Let's see. Did you email them to me?
I did.
You did. Okay. Yep. Hang on just a second. I'm going to have to go into Google. Keep talking.
I'll keep talking.
Okay.
So that's what I was doing. I was sitting there stitching while we watched this World War II documentary, and my attention circled back to the television just about the time I heard maybe 3 sentences devoted to something called Action T4. And I perked up, and in a span of 3 seconds, this big fat crazy idea whooshed in, sat on my shoulder, whispered in my ear, listen carefully, Shug, because this is how you're going to spend the next several years of your life and all your children's inheritance. And just like that, I knew everything. I saw the quilts hanging. I didn't know why the red X's in the white background, but I saw them. I knew all I've done is just follow directions ever since then. I launched the project 10 days later before I had time to think myself out of it. And before our 3rd anniversary, we had exceeded our initial goal of 70,273 commemorations. I'll show you in a few minutes where I got that number in case you don't already know. So,
hold on a sec. Keep talking. I'm getting there.
We have a desktop. So that's how it all got started. I had to research, of course, to find out. There we go.
Oh, see it right there?
That's the first one. So if
Okay.
you can skip on over to the second one.
Okay. Let's see.
There it is. That's Nancy drawing. And actually she's drawing what became, every time she draws, every time I visit, I leave her with clean paper and pick up everything she's drawn. And I bring it home, I scan it, I archive it, I store it in using archival materials. And then I start stitching. And I stitch every drawing in a set. And then that finished piece becomes part of the In Our Own Language series. These drawings actually became In Our Own Language 3. And we were at a conference room table with some other, I was trying to get her moved to a new day program where she'd have more mental stimulation. And so we were with the facilities manager and her state coordinator and all of these other people who are involved in her life, making sure that she has quality of life. And they kept talking about her as though she weren't there, which is very easy to do. And they meant no disrespect. They just weren't conscious of it. And so I would occasionally say, she's right here. Let's not forget, she's right here. And that was the smile came at one of those times when I said that. So if you'll go to the next slide, Dee.
Oh, wrong way. Sorry.
That's okay. Slide. Yeah, there we go. So here it is, finished. This is In Our Own Language 3. There are 267 drawings. This is a 90-inch diameter piece of fabric. And here it is hanging in an exhibit at the Ross Museum on the campus of Ohio Wesleyan University. And then if you'll go to the next one. That gives you sort of a close-up or excuse me, a closer look at the images and a sort of a perspective of what size it is. That's the engineer and me. And so there, if you look at it, you'll see a lot of things that look like her name. And I think that's because she has no way to tell us. But I think that's because that was the context of these drawings, was her saying, I'm Nancy and I'm here. So that's what I was doing. I researched and I found out more about Action T4. And I found out that there were 70,273 people with disabilities murdered under that physician-run program. And I knew that I had to do something. So, like I said, I launched the program 10 days later, and it took off like a flash. There are more than 100, I think there are about 147 countries involved right now. And this is 4 years later. But before our third anniversary, we were up to 76,000 commemorations. And I don't encourage them. I don't beat the drum for them anymore, but I keep accepting blocks and quilts because we now know that there were many, many, many more than that 70,273 people with disabilities murdered over the course. That was just the ones documented in Action T4's books. Okay, slide 5, please. There, you might have already seen this since y'all been studying it. This is some of the propaganda. Hitler kept this project very, 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 very secret because he wanted to protect the physicians that staffed and ran and were the leadership and the execution of the project. He actually got the idea in the fall of 1939 when one of his SS officers approached him and asked permission to kill his 5-month-old son, who was born with multiple disabilities. Hitler said, dispatched his personal physician to investigate, and the personal physician came back and said, yes, this child is missing some limbs and he has multiple issues. And so Hitler gave permission. The baby had been known throughout history as Baby K, to protect, again, he wanted to protect this SS officer. And so he buried Action T4 very, very, very deeply. When I started the project, talking to people, like I said, 147 countries, we got up to that quickly. You could count on 2 hands the number of people who had ever heard of Action T4. and you'd have fingers left over. So now that's not the case. Thank goodness that's not the case. This was one of their propaganda tactics when they tried to, to make it sound very noble, that this person will cost this much money to feed, and wouldn't you rather feed your own family with that? They also called the people with disabilities life unworthy of life, which still just sometimes tears, sometimes goosebumps, but always enkindles a physical reaction in me. Okay, 6, please, Dee. So they created a special bus system. As you may know, the physicians of Action T4 created a questionnaire that they sent out to schools and families and institutions throughout Germany and nearby countries. It went out in the fall of 1939, so the people receiving it, at least there's a theory that says the people receiving it thought they were filling it out to keep their disabled loved one out of the war. Actually, that, as we now know, was not the case. This is the only information the assessing physicians used when making their life or death decision. They read the answers on the questionnaire, 3 assessing physicians, and when 2 of them put a red X at the bottom of the form, the person was murdered as expeditiously as possible. They created this, and that's the name of it, the charitable transport system. They created this to go around and pick up the people and take them to one of the 6 receiving centers where they were murdered. If you see the guys in the white coats in the picture, those are SS officers. SS officers would just don a lab coat over their uniform and ride the bus with the people who were headed to one of the receiving centers to maintain order, to make sure that nobody tried to jump off the bus. Okay, next, number 7. This is one of the receiving centers. This is the one that the bus was taking people to in the previous slide. It looks very peaceful, very serene, and like a place you'd like to go and spend a long weekend. This was one of the receiving centers. 9,839 people with disabilities were murdered in that lovely, lovely looking place. Slide number 8, please, Dee. Hartheim was another one of the receiving centers. 18,269 people were murdered there. Okay, next slide, please. Here's the breakdown of the 6 receiving centers. They kept meticulous records. They destroyed a lot of them, of course, in the last days of the war. But this, according to the records that they kept, this is the tally. That's how I came up with the number 70,273. As you can see, Hartheim they were busy there. Wait, there was something I was going to tell you I was thinking about. One of the bookkeepers, of course, who kept the records, they kept meticulous records, except when it came to cause of death. They just came up with an idea and created a list of acceptable causes of death: pneumonia, cancer, something like that. And then they sent letters and death certificates to the surviving family members, but they filled in the cause of death in alphabetical order instead of just plucking one out of a hat. So they went down the list and assigned causes of death. And sometimes there was a complication with the surgery to remove an organ that the person did not have. So they were not very meticulous in that part of their record keeping, but they did keep numbers. Numbers were everything. They also, I believe it was Hartheim, when they murdered their 10,000th victim, their 10,000th human being, that morning the supervisor of Hartheim came on the intercom and said, at 3 o'clock, I want everybody to gather down in the morgue. And at 3 o'clock that afternoon, when everybody gathered at the morgue, there was a small orchestra playing, an ensemble playing. There was wine and cheese and crackers and fruits. Flowers were everywhere. And there was a 10,000th person murdered laying on the table, ready to go into the, whatever you call it when you're cremated, ready to go in there. They put flowers around his neck, and there was a celebration because they had reached 10,000. They had murdered 10,000 people. And for them, this was cause for celebration. Okay, next slide, please, Dee.
Oh, sorry, jumped ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. Number 10. I didn't tell you which number. Okay, so the blocks, as you probably already surmised, the 2 X's commemorate one person because when 2 out of the 3 assessing physicians put a red X on the bottom of the questionnaire, the person was murdered. When I was in Germany in 2017, they had lots of exhibits in Germany, and I was there for one of them, and we went to one of the concentration camps, and in their museum, we actually saw these forms with the red X's at the bottom. They wouldn't let me take pictures of it, but it was chilling, as you can imagine. So that's what the 2 red X's stand for. And that's why 2 red X's, not 1, not 3, not 27, but 2, commemorate one person. The white or slightly off-white background represents the paper of the questionnaires, which is the only information physicians sought when making their life or death decisions. Slide 11, please, Dee. This is quilt number 1, our very first quilt, and it has blocks from all around the world. France, Italy, Germany, the United States, the UK, Channel Islands, which is part of the UK. These blocks come from around the world in quilt 1. The next slide, number 12, please, Dee. This is quilt number 29. It was made by Métis Finling, a woman in France. Now, a little detour disclaimer here. My mouth is only fluent in English and Southern. So I say that's her name. But if she were to stand in front of me and I called her that, she wouldn't know who I was talking to probably. But that's Métis Finling. And she made these France came on board with the project immediately. And Métis, she had made several quilts already. And a friend of hers who was a midwife during the early 1940s died of natural causes around into 2016, beginning of 2017. Now this friend had been, like I said, a midwife. And when Métis went over to help clear the house, she went up in the attic and she found bags of baby clothes. And her brain went click, click, click. 70273 project. Baby clothes, early 1940s. And so she pulled out all the clothes with red and white, all the baby clothes. She laundered them, and this is what this quilt is made of. Okay, number 13, please. La Cause France held our first Ask Me Early. They asked me in 2016. We weren't even 6 months old. The project wasn't. And they said, we would love to have an exhibit here. So in the next June, they held the first major international exhibit in La Cause, France. This is in a 14th century temple in this delightful village. I tried to buy a house there while we were there. And I got the mayor to come down $36,000 US. But the engineer still was a no-go. He said it needed too much work. And I said, how can you tell? We can't even look inside it. He said, it's all boarded up. That's how I know. So I could be talking to you from La Cause, France. Weren't for the engineer. Oh, well. Slide number 14, please. This is at Rochester Cathedral. Early on, the acting dean of Rochester Cathedral saw this on Instagram and said, I want you to fill Rochester Cathedral with these quilts when you have enough. And I said, will do. Well, then he left and he went somewhere else. And I thought, okay, but he came back. He came back to Rochester Cathedral. He remembered it. And my ambassador in Rochester UK. By that point, I told her about it. She contacted him and he said, yes, of course I remember. And so in January of 2018, for Holocaust Memorial Day, which is big in Europe, it's very big in Europe, we filled Rochester Cathedral with quilts of the 70273. If you go on the website or you go to YouTube, you'll see some videos, and the website you'll see photos. It is just astonishing to see this ancient cathedral filled with these quilts. Now, I put these two particular panels in here. These are ginormous panels. Each one, of course, is legal, doing air quotes, because it has two red X's. The two red X's are covered with other pairs of red X's. Everything on these two panels was made by people with vision disabilities. Anywhere from what I have, which is wet macular degeneration, so I don't see to read very well, and to total blindness. 2,200 commemorations in these two panels. Okay, slide number 15, please. This is in the Channel Islands. This is quilt, well, I can't read the number.
88.
Oh, 88, okay. So, and this was taken, every parish or province, I think it's every parish in the Channel Islands made at least one quilt. I had 2 ambassadors there, and they were phenomenal. All my ambassadors are phenomenal. And then they went around and they pictured the quilt in the province. They also had, in January of 2018, had a Holocaust Remembrance exhibit at the Heritage Center there in Jersey, Channel Islands. We went to that as well. And then we spent a few days there, and my ambassadors took me around, and they are very, very much touched by this, because this was the last place, the Channel Islands was the last place the Germans pulled away from, the last place they exited and went back to their homeland. So we actually walked in bunkers where they were. We saw the cannons, the underground bunkers, the cannons. It was chilling, absolutely chilling. Okay, next slide, number 16. There we are. So there was a special exhibit. The 70273 project had been invited to be a special exhibit in Utah. And the engineer and I go every time we can so we can explain to people. You'll see a slide when we were at Houston at the International Quilt Festival. That was in November 2017. And a lot of people, it was a beautiful hanging. The exhibit was hung so exquisitely. The sign, however, was at one end only. So people would walk up from the main aisle, come through this, and you could hear them talking about this must be a school project. They must be learning to make X's. Oh, maybe it's a genetics thing. And then they would get up to the front and they would read the sign. And the tears would come and mouths would be covered. Well, so there we were in Utah. The same thing was happening. We were staying there so we could explain it to them. But that day we were really hungry, so we scooted over to where they had lunch for us. And while we were gone, and I mean, we ate fast, y'all. We ate real fast. While we were gone, we left the book out. We came back, and a woman had signed it saying, I'm from the Netherlands, and I am very homesick because today is World War II Memorial Day in the Netherlands. This is the day that we, the entire community, all ages, we clear the cemeteries of the World War II veterans. And as we're clearing, we're telling the next generation stories about World War II. And then tomorrow, she said, will be the second day, and that's when World War II veterans come and they tell us their stories, the entire community. And I just kept willing her to come back. Oh, please come back. Oh, please come back. Oh, please come back. And she did. She came back. So that's Yvonne. And she became the ambassador for the Netherlands and has made quilts and spread the word about Action T4 and the 70273 project in the Netherlands. You see the little dress quilt over her right shoulder. That's a second kind of quilt that I unveiled during the life of the project. It's not a traditional block quilt like we started with, like the one that's behind us. This is more of an art quilt. And one day I was walking through a thrift shop And I was going out the back door because it was raining, and that does terrible things to my hair. So I was going out the back door, and they were throwing this little dress away. And I swear the dress went, "Psst, I'm one of your people." So I caught the dress before it hit the trash can and asked the woman, could I buy this? And she said, "You can just have it." And I said, "Why are you getting rid of it?" And she said, "Because it's got a rip and stains on it." And I said to myself, that's where the stories are. So I took the dress home and I said, "Okay, Shug, what do you want me to do with you?" And it took several months. And then finally she said, "I just want you to, make me into a commemorative project." So there are, I think, 15 or 1,700. No, there are more than 2,000 people commemorated in that one 18-inch by 24-inch quilt. Just bonus information. Okay, slide number 17, please. And this was in Germany. This was at their biggest exhibit in Germany. Dachau had like 3 exhibits. I didn't get to go to those. All over Germany, they had exhibits. I went to the biggest one. They invited me and I went to it. And I was a little nervous. How am I going to tell Germans about their own history? And I didn't want them to feel like I was finger pointing. Well, I needn't worry about it because I don't speak German and a lot of them didn't speak English, but I can point in any language. And so they had written the information out and I could just point and they would read it. I got a lot of stories and I needn't have worried really. The ones who spoke English, the people who spoke English, made a point to come by and meet me and tell me how much this meant to them and how embarrassed and how guilty they felt about this Action T4, to which I immediately said, no, you don't bear the guilt of your ancestors. That you didn't do it. Your ancestors did. You do, however, bear the responsibilities to make sure it never happens again. And the good news is the whole world shares that responsibility with you. These quilts right here were made in German schools, kindergarten and first grade, and they mainstreamed their classes there. So they had kindergartners and first graders, some with disabilities, some, air quotes, normal. And they all made these quilts together and they talked about kindness as they were doing it. And they talked about compassion and empathy, big concepts, but never too early to start learning them. So that was really cool. And also in Germany, people would come and take me by the hand and they would take me to a specific quilt and point to a specific block, for example, and then they would tell me the story behind it. One woman pointed to her block and said, and I've got this recorded, I don't know if I've uploaded it to YouTube yet or not, but one woman said this block was dedicated to her 5-year-old cousin or uncle, who when he was 5 years old, he had one leg that was longer than the other. And so the government contacted his parents and said, we have this new program, this new facility, where we can take much better care of him than you can. So if you will release him to our care, we will take care of him. Well, what parent doesn't want the best care for their child? And so they said, okay. 2 weekends later, they packed a picnic lunch and they drove to where as we now know, one of the receiving centers. They drove there and there was no one there. He was one of the 70,273 people we remember and commemorate. I got several stories like that, which are pretty close. The last slide, please, Dee, number 18. This was at Houston. This was at the International Quilt Festival, which we had a lot of people from France came and they were looking for their quilts. It was just fascinating. This was just astonishing. And so we've been all over the world. These are just a handful of the exhibits. And everywhere we go, people are handed information about Action T4 because there's so many things we can't ever forget. And this Action T4 is one of them. And the way we can't, like I said in my initial blog post, because that's all I did to launch it. I wrote a blog post and it took off. We can't unwrap the veil of history, but we can wrap it in kindness and compassion and do what we can to ensure that it never, ever, ever happens again, at least not on our watch. So those are all the slides. If you'll bring us back together, Dee. Yay, there you are. So that's a nutshell version of the 70273 project. Have you any questions? Anybody have any questions?
Let's see so I can see everybody's little hands here. Why don't I always,
can't, but you can.
okay, I always feel as though we should give Mike a chance to speak, since he's he's my supervisor.
Yes, please
So I
speak,
was
Mike.
here for Mike.
I think you're giving me too much credit, Dee. I really appreciate your presentation, because so I remember in graduate school when I first learned about the T4 program, it was from my faculty that I was professors in my program who were creating a documentary film, and so there was a lot of sort of archival parts in that film of going and there's some pretty terrible scenes actually of them actually in the gas chambers that had been repurposed, right? That they looked like showers and that they were the gas chambers.
Right.
Talking about this.
They actually, there's, Mike, if I can interrupt just a minute,
Yeah.
there is some research that says they actually invented the gas chambers murdering these people. There's some people believe that, and that they, as you said, repurposed them after they shut this program down in August of, when the bishops raised a lot of noise about it. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt, please.
No, not at all. And just how the people, well, what they told us was that the surrounding communities had to have known what was going on because of the amount of ash that was coming out every day. And literally seeing these buses come up with these blacked out windows and people being offloaded and no one ever leaving, right? And so how normalized that becomes, right? That this violence, this murder just becomes so normalized within a setting that devalues disability. And so I love that you have created a way for people to try to memorialize as best they can this violence that for many generations people didn't know about, right? It's not to prioritize this type of violence over another, but I think I really appreciate how you put it all in a connection, and that's not really a question, Dee, but it's just sort of I like this participatory part of it.
Yeah. The which is why, Jeanne, the topic is, Mike and I have, been studying disability or disability for quite a while. And there's usually within the different courses that we take, Justin, I think you're down there. I think Justin's down there at the iPad, but I know that Justin's just about finished with his certificate in disability studies. Nia, Kevin, Tia, I know that's your major as well, and Maya, who isn't on for some reason here, but there's always a little bit of element. Oh no, I'm sorry, Maya, you're there. Carly. For some reason, Carly and Maya, I mix them up all the time. I'm never going to be allowed to forget that, incidentally.
Dee, you did it again. You did it again.
All the time. It was like in her advising meeting the other day. She was giving me crap. So anyway. But yes, Carly. Okay, Maya's a first-year student, so she hasn't declared yet. But she might be a disability student. Yeah. But at any rate, a lot of the history and a lot of the study is cross disability, but there's not as much focus specifically on intellectual and developmental disability, which is why that's the course, is the history of intellectual and developmental disability in the US, because there are some things that really are very specific or under that particular label of feeble-mindedness, and all of the other antiquated expressions that we used to
Right.
use, and that we had to kind of prepare ourselves at the beginning of the semester of, some of the language that you're going to see
Right.
is going to offend modern sensibilities because we know better, but to see how a lot of these different things will come through and will leak through in terms of human rights. Now, Tia over here, Tia works for TASH. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that organization, but Tia is the Director of Advocacy and Policy. Is that right, Tia? Did you have anything that you wanted to ask?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, please do. Go ahead.
So when you do these shows, I'm sure you charge for something like that. How much do you charge to? I know that there's a lot of people with disabilities that would be really interested in actually having your information and learning about it.
Well, are you talking about sending the quilts for a show, or me going? Because I usually go if I can. I sometimes have to pay my own way because it's that important to me to talk to people about this. The shipping of the quilts is usually, that's always covered by the organization to ship the quilts and, get them back. And some buy me meals or something when I go, but mostly, I'm glad my husband can't hear me, but mostly I pay my own way because it's that important to me that this not be forgotten. And a lot of times when I go in person, I'll do a block, what I call a block drive. And so we'll have the quilts, we'll talk about the quilts, and then people are given the opportunity to make a block that then becomes a quilt. All of those blocks go into a quilt for that organization or that university or that whatever.
Because we also have, I'm also part of a national self-advocacy organization, Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered. We have a national conference every other year, and this would probably be really amazing for people to learn about and to see. I mean, it would be something that would be wonderful, that we'd be interested in probably following up more with you to figure that out maybe sometime.
I would love to talk to you more about that. Dee, can you give her my email address?
Oh,
would you please?
absolutely. Yeah.
Cell phone number, email address, everything. Tell her every way to get in touch with me.
Okay, sounds good.
And then you get in touch with me and that'll give me your contact information.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Thank you.
That will be great. I have
really
entire quilts. I'm sorry, I'm talking over somebody.
Oh, that's okay. That was me. Just keep going.
Oh, it's just Dee. I have quilt number 5, which is, it was made early because we have 850 quilts now. We actually have more than 800. That's the last number we gave that was 850. Quilt number 5, I got a call after, like within the week of the initial blog post going out. And this woman who had always followed me because of Nancy, and she's the educational director at a facility in Ohio, Findlay, Ohio, for people with disabilities of all ages. I'm going to take a detour right here. You're talking about language. And yes, Nancy, when she was first, when she was hung, she was called retarded. And then it went to emotional and mentally trained. So I've lived through, and I taught 4th grade with learning disabilities just as they were being identified. They didn't know what to do with these kids, so they threw them all in my class and said, here you go, and locked the door, which was the best thing they could have ever done for me, hopefully for the children too.
Happened with me too. That was, my class was sort of like, we have no idea what to do with these kids. We're just going to send them to D and see what happens.
Yeah. They wouldn't let my kids go to art class. They wouldn't let them go to PE. They wouldn't. So I did everything, no music that other classes got to go to give the teacher a break. I got no breaks. I had no parapro. So that's the way it went. But it made me a much better teacher because out of 15 students, I had 8 reading groups. Wow. So that tells you about the different levels of abilities. Back to Findlay, Ohio. So this person contacted me and she said, we are so on this. We are on this. We're going to have a block making day. We're going to have 100% participation. And they did. They have ages 3 through adults, 99-year-olds, and they held their block making day, and all of the residents and students put on their best Sunday clothes and their biggest hair bows, and they came and they made blocks. And so that's quilt number 5. I drove it up there on Holocaust Memorial Day one year. I drove it up there and made a presentation, and they got to keep it for a month and let people come and look at it and everything. Well, this one young man there, Jordan, is a resident there. And Jordan that day, the block making day, learned how to use the sewing machine. And it changed his life. Now when you see Jordan, he stands like this with his chest out. And he is so proud because he makes everybody costumes. Nobody's exempt. And he's so good. He can look at you and tell what size you need. He goes home, he makes it, he brings it to you, and you will wear it. And you will wear it all day. He has done marvelous things with a sewing machine. Just story after story after story.
Would he do an Obi-Wan Kenobi robe?
Oh yeah, he needs to, right?
Right,
He needs
exactly.
to do that.
so that Mike can be appropriately attired.
I'd first have to watch the movie, right, Dee?
Yeah, you need to work on that.
Yeah.
So, but it's, oh, and did you see Lacey's face? She's like, no way.
I know. It's true. It's true, Lacey. Yes, it's true.
Oh boy, that's a big admission, Mike. Wow. Okay. Well, see, Mike is on my doctoral committee, so he can, for the defense, he can wear the Obi-Wan robe, but just be real careful with the lightsaber. Okay.
Yeah. You may want to leave that outside the door. Anybody else have anything else you'd like to say or ask? Yes. Are you raising your hand?
Maya is how many years have you made quilts? How many years have you made quilts?
Me personally or the project quilts?
Oh,
Me personally?
Jeannie? The project quilts? The project quilts.
Project quilts. Well, we launched on Valentine's Day 2016. That was my birthday gift to myself, was to launch this big, fat, crazy idea. And that was in 2016. So we're 4 years old. So we've been making quilts for the project for 4 years.
Wow. Do you do you live in do you live in New York?
Oh no, thank goodness right now. Thank goodness I don't right now. No, I live on top of a mountain in North Carolina. On the tip top of a mountain. I've got a waterfall running right outside this window. You want to see it?
Want to see it? Yes.
All right. If it makes you dizzy, when I move the screen, close your eyes. I'll tell you when to open it, but here you go. I'm going to show you the window. Don't look at the clutter. I have 1,000 projects going on. Okay, here. Can you see it?
Oh, pretty.
Not yet. You have to kind of guide me. I can't.
Okay.
I
A
can't tell
little
what you can
to
see.
your left.
Yep.
Oh, okay. We see the bird. We see the hummingbird feeder.
Okay.
Is that
So
what
I
that
need
is
to
out
get
there?
you down. Yeah. Wait.
Oh, now we see you.
Just travel with me. Travel with me a moment.
Sure.
I'll take you out there because it's just on the other side of the window. Okay. We're going. And you'll hear it before you see it. There's the window. And there's the falls.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's beautiful.
I could get used to that.
Yeah. Oh my
Right.
goodness. It's just gorgeous out there.
Mhm.
Jeanne, I only just noticed your blouse. That you've
Oh,
got you got the X's on there as well.
yeah. I made this on the way to La Cause for that exhibit,
Hmm.
and it's well, we'll say asymmetrical
Yeah.
because I didn't finish this side.
Well, it's okay. The project continues.
I call it a design choice.
Yeah. There you go. Is there
Okay.
is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? You can either type it in and I'll read it to Jeanne, or you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask or make a comment. Nia, you look like you're thinking. It's Nia's thinking face. She's looking for an intersection. Just give her a minute.
Yeah. Intersection, intersection.
Yeah,
Just blurred it.
she's good. She's good that way.
I'm pondering.
We are, by the
Oh,
way.
she's pondering.
Okay, good.
Sure. It's okay. The class usually runs till 1:50, so as long as you don't need to dash off somewhere, we can entertain a few more questions. So if people
Okay,
would
good.
like, so yeah, we'll let Nia ponder for a little while.
I am trying to get these quilts exhibited at the United Nations,
Oh
just
wow.
so you'll know, because
Yeah,
I think that's an appropriate place.
yeah, absolutely.
I don't allow politics in the project because it's divisive, and this is about unity and compassion, and we just haven't evolved to a place where we can talk about politics.
Yeah, hopefully we're getting there. Maybe.
I hope.
Okay.
Okay.
The universe
I
sending
think
all of us
she's
to our
pondered.
room. Go ahead, Nia. You have the floor.
Well, I was gonna say, no, I actually didn't think of a question, but because of what you said about wanting to get it hung in the UN, I actually interned with Global Citizen over the last summer in New York City. I don't know if you've heard about them, but they're a
Yes.
nonprofit, and I started the campaign with my lead there, the disability campaign, actually. So it started the summer that I started, and we work a lot with the UN. So if you wanted, I've been to the UN a few times. We've held events there. So if you wanted, I could get in contact with him because he was who I personally worked with, and see if I could give you his information, and see what could happen
Yes,
there.
please.
Potentially. It wasn't a question,
That
but
would
I
be
just thought of
great.
that because
Yeah,
I do have that connection.
that'd be terrific. I'll make sure to put all your contact information. Jeanne will put it up on Blackboard, which is the central site.
Good.
We also have a doctoral student at SU. His name is Mirjahan Turdiev. He's from Uzbekistan, and he's done quite a bit of work, and he's working on his, he and I are in class together, and he's doing research on disability in Uzbekistan and how that particular culture regards disability. And so he's done quite a bit of work, and he's done a lot of work at the UN. So I think between Nia and Mirjahan, I'm sure we can connect you with somebody, because I think that would be
great.
I think that'd be a fantastic idea.
Well, these you get these ideas, and I just put them out to the universe, and there's always somebody who says,
something.
I have something that will help.
That's
It's
right.
amazing how that happens.
Oh,
And I also wanted to say this. I'm going back to language and vocabulary again. When this first started, that was sort of a hiccup for me. Am I going to call them special needs? In Georgia, there people with disabilities, students, we are required to call them extraordinary, which is causing all sorts of, I guess, hopefully unintended repercussions. What am I going to do? If the word disability is rather ancient, it's from the past too. And then I decided that's it. That's why I have to use that word, because this is Action T4 was 1940 to 1941, although it actually started in the fall of 1939, but Hitler changed the dates on things. And so that's why I use the word disabilities, because it fits the time context of this.
Right. When we spoke about that at the kind of early on in the semester, it suddenly occurred to me too. I said, oh, we really need to send you a copy of the disability history book that I wrote, that I made the students buy.
Yes.
So,
Why am I just now finding out about this?
Oh,
It doesn't matter. I'm finding out about it now.
I am a woman of great mystery. You just haven't had to put up with me just yet, but I'll make sure that you get a copy of that. But the whole
Great,
question,
thank you.
the question at the beginning was, is it the term that's being used? Because actually, the term mentally retarded was favored by parents in the 1950s because they were still using the labels of idiot, imbecile, and moron up until that point. But then when it was co-opted as a playground taunt, intellectual and developmental disability became the common used term. But that it's until we do something, until we address the stigma and
Yes.
make sure that the stigma is, we take we eliminate that, as we've done with many other marginalized identities in the US, that it's not going to matter what we say, because someone will take that devalued position and turn it into another taunt. So that's part of what we're doing, and we're hoping too with students who are in Inclusive U, who, up until we hear from parents all the time when students are applying, hear from students themselves. People said that I was never going to go to college. I was never going to go. And so when we have parents who apply, or their students are accepted or something like that, we have, actually that's Tanya, who's down there in the frame with Maya. Maya's mom. And, I'm sure you remember on the first day that, during orientation, that we had parents in tears. They said that they never thought this would happen.
Yes.
Never thought this would happen. And students who said, this wasn't going to happen either. So we're taking over the university tomorrow, the UN,
That's right.
We're out there.
Well,
Just be careful. And actually, in the middle of a big emergency like this, you need people with disabilities. You need people who can think outside of the box. Y'all got to be
you
ready.
do.
The world is going to ride out of this crisis on the backs of the Crips. I swear. It's gonna
Exactly. And that's part of the message when I'm not talking about people who are like me and know disabilities and understand it and want to know more and want to change the world. When I'm talking to people who aren't that familiar, I say, if we could move us to a place in the world where we don't talk about abilities, but we talk about people. I mean, not the way the Southerners talk about people, which, well, can you believe that dress she was wearing? Nothing like that. But you know what I mean. Talk about people, just as people. And everybody, because everybody's better at something they are. Everybody has something they need help with.
Yeah.
Now there are people with disabilities who don't like my position on that. And it happens.
You can never please everybody.
You can't.
It's also a process, of people kind of. Well, we've had people sometimes give us a funny look of, well, why would you be proud of your disability identity? Why would you be so proud to identify as part of the disability community? And it's like, well, we're here, and we have a great deal to offer. And, it really, honestly, I mean, that's why we say that most places need individuals with disabilities, because everyone needs an injection of creativity and innovation and what can come through the people for whom the world has not historically been built. Listen to what individuals have to say. It's going to be better for everybody.
That's exactly what I was thinking. And then we're all better off.
Yeah.
And I have lots of friends who don't want my position. Like we're all just people,
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. I learn a lot from them and we're friends. It's not like they, want to slug me or anything, but I think it's important that like you say, their abilities and people, some of my best friends have autism or Asperger's, and it is so refreshing to talk to them because we don't have the baggage of emotion and innuendo, and which is a Southern thing too. You know, you don't just say something; it's got layers and layers and layers underneath it. So it's nice to talk to somebody that you can just talk.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jeanne, this has been amazing, and we're also going to put you on the list for when the students create their virtual museum.
Yay.
And we'll make sure that you get that copy. Folks, I'll send out an email about this, but I'd like it if we could maybe sort out another like 20 or 30-minute meeting on Thursday, just so I can show you something that I'm going to be contributing to the museum that might spark some ideas for you. But remember, it doesn't have to be a whatever event or person that you're working with from the history of disability. You can choose to do something of a more creative nature this way, whether it is a video or whether a poem, a song, a drawing or something like that, or it can be a more traditional historical type of piece, and you'll be able to explain the backstory with the final written part, which is basically going to be the museum catalog. But I know that since we had to make this shift so fast, we didn't have a chance to really talk about, well, what would this look like online. So I'd like to, if we could, I'll send out the information, and if folks can stop by on Thursday for about a half an hour, I can show you what it is that I'm doing. And then if you want to model yours after that, or model it after, Jeanne's project or something like that, all of those things would be great. So, okay. Anyone else? Lacey, I want to give you a hug. You look cold.
You look comfortable.
You do look comfortable.
My living room, I'm always freezing.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad everybody is pretty comfortable, even the people whose little shining faces we didn't see. So, anything else? Anything else that anyone wants to say?
I just want to thank you, Dee, for making this happen, and thank you all for being here. And Dee's going to give you all my contact information, so please let me hear from you. So I'll have your contact information, and we'll get ourselves in the UN, and we'll do a big conference and let more people know and get involved.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. Maya, did you want to ask something or say something? Oh, can't hear you. You got on mute. Okay. What am I doing? I think you have to do it. There you go.
Thank you, Jeannie, for your thank you for your presentation.
Oh. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's wonderful. We're really always very happy to see you and learn about the project. It was great, and it's wonderful to see everybody's faces too. Keep the faith. We're getting through. All right. Wonderful to see everybody. Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.